I'll let you know when we're live.
Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee, including those who are watching online. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices via the stairs, either through the security doors on my right or opposite the lifts in the foyer. Please do not use the lifts. Please assemble in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist you and advise when it is deemed safe to return to the chamber. Does anyone intend to film the meeting? No, thank you. However, I would advise that speakers using the microphones are picked up by the cameras recording the meeting. Members of the public in the public gallery behind the speakers may be picked up by those cameras and have their image captured. Any member of the public who objects to the possibility of being filmed may wish to take this opportunity to move or leave the meeting. Would everyone present please ensure their mobile phones are turned to silent and that they are not used to make or receive phone calls or messages in the chamber whilst this meeting is in progress. I have the following members who wish to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1, and that little list has changed a lot in the last couple of minutes. So, I have Councillor Banbridge, item 4I, Councillor Yates, item 4I as well, Councillor Garner, item...
Councillor Garner? Yeah, 4B.
4B,
Okay, 4B.
And Councillor Smith, item 4H. Thank you. Would any other members who wish to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1 please announce it now? Thank you. The following applications have been reserved for public speaking. Item 4A, land and buildings on the northwest side of Shotton Road, Margate. Item 4B, 53 to 55 Albion Street, Broadstairs. Item 4H, land on the west side of Tothill Street, Ramsgate. Item 4I, the Britannia, Fort Hill, Broadstairs. That is complete, isn't it? Yes. I have apologies from Councillor Driver. Do I have any other apologies? Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Garner.
Yeah, I'm declaring an interest in item 4B.
Thank you. Do members... Oh, apologies. Councillor Bayford.
Yes, I also declare an interest in item 4B.
Yeah, I also declare an interest in item 4B.
Thank you. So, do members agree that the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 13th of March be approved as a correct record? And can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Moore, and a seconder? Councillor Wing, thank you. Do members agree? Thank you. The Planning Applications Manager will outline a point of information regarding AO1, land and buildings on the northwest side of Shotton Road, and item DO8, land west of Tothill Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding item 4A, land and buildings on the northwest side of Shotton Road, Margate, officers are seeking to alter the trigger stated in condition 2 in the recommendation. The condition currently reads, prior to the first occupation of the development hereby permitted, the access roads as shown on the submitted plan, numbered P101U, received 5th of April 2024, shall be provided and made operational unless otherwise agreed in writing through the construction management plan. The trigger is proposed to be altered to prior to the first occupation of the relevant home, and that's to ensure that the access roads serving the individual properties are in place, rather than restrict all occupations for all the roads. And the recommended condition is updated in the officer recommendation. And on item 4H, which is land on the west side of Tothill Street, Ramsgate, condition 9 requires the details of the protective fencing around the archaeological exclusion zone to be submitted prior to commencement, and then the fence installed prior to the work occurring. Those details have been submitted now and agreed by KCC Archaeology, and therefore the recommended condition is updated to reflect this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any site visits will take place for committee members on the morning of Friday the 3rd of May 2024. Moving on to agenda item 4A, items reserved for public speaking, land and buildings on the northwest side of Shottendane Road, Margate. Speaking in favour of the application, Ms Nicola Bale, you have 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, councillors. My name is Nicola Bale, and I am the Development Director at Places for People. Places for People are an award-winning affordable homes-led social enterprise whose ambition is to create thriving communities by providing high-quality, sustainable homes and places. We're currently delivering over 230 affordable homes in Thanet at our Manston Green project, where homes will start to be occupied later this year. In early 2023, we expanded our portfolio in Thanet through the acquisition of the Shottendane Road site, which already benefits from outline planning permission secured by Gladman Developments at Appeal in February 22. The outline planning permission permits up to 450 new homes and the delivery of key transport infrastructure, with all matters reserved except for access. The principle and quantum of development has therefore already been established, and the role of subsequent reserved matters applications, including this one before you tonight, is to demonstrate compliance with the outline consent. The detailed design and layout of this first phase has been informed by a robust pre-application and consultation exercise, with no objections received to the application. We have worked closely with the officers at Thanet District Council and Kent County Council over the last 14 months to ensure all relevant standards are met and feedback from statutory consultees fully addressed. We'd like to thank officers for their time and commitment in this process. We've sought to make enhancements to the original master plan, including the delivery of additional affordable housing through the provision of grant funding from our strategic partnership with Homes England. We consider the Phase 1 proposals deliver the following significant benefits: 138 high-quality new homes, including 90 family-size homes, which will start to be occupied next year, more than 3 times the provision of consented affordable housing, delivering 49% shared ownership and affordable rent homes, alleviating pressure on the council's waiting list, of which there is currently 1,529 households. 4.3 acres of open space and public realm, including new trees, meadows, parks, trim trails that will be accessible to all. Significant improvements to traffic in the local area through the provision of new strategic highways infrastructure, alleviating pressure on the junction at Coffin House Corner. 265 residential and visitor car parking spaces, including EV charging points for every home, 3 metre wide shared pedestrian cycleway to promote sustainable modes of transport, and contributions of over £3 million towards local infrastructure, including schools, libraries, medical facilities and highways improvements. To conclude, this reserved matters application fully complies with the parameters set by the extant outline planning permission. The proposals go above and beyond those within the consented master plan, in particular through the provision of 3 times the amount of affordable housing. We therefore consider that there is every reason to follow officers' recommendation and grant approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The Principal Planning Officer will now outline the report. Oh, sorry, it's not the...
Sorry, it's me. Thank you, Chair. So the application site is outlined in red, but the wider site is outlined in blue on the slide. So this is, as already mentioned, the site that was approved at a public inquiry following a refusal of members of the application for 450 houses. This is an allocated site in the local plan, allocated for 550 dwellings. So the site is located, primarily this Phase 1 site is located adjacent to Hartsdown Road and also adjacent to Shottendane Road, which runs in this area here where the mouse is moving. So this is an aerial image of the area. So you can see Coffin House Corner. We've got the Salmston Grange site, which we looked at a few months ago, and then you've got the 2 parcels of land, one which is the darker green, which is where Phase 1 is, and then another phase later on, which is between Manston Road and Shottendane Road. So this is one of the approved parameter plans for the development of the wider site for the 450 dwellings. So what you have is 3 key bits of infrastructure which are being provided in terms of junction specifically. So you have a new junction on Hartsdown Road, you have a new roundabout on Shottendane Road, and you have a new roundabout on Manston Road. The parameters that are shown here relate to primarily to a general idea of development parcels. So you've got the shades of yellow relate to stories in height. So the darker yellow areas were up to 3 stories in height. The slightly less dark yellow is up to 2.5 stories in height, and on the outer areas, so if we take this large area here between Shottendane Road and Manston Road, is the up to 2 stories in height for dwellings. The green space is as suspected. It's the strategic green space for the development of the site. It also links into the strategy for surface water drainage, which runs through from, if we take the bottom of the site here on the southwest corner, through the site, along with that sort of line. And also then there are 2 elements attached to this shaded area in the bottom here, which relates to an archaeological exclusion zone and also for mitigation area for skylarks. But we're primarily looking, or we are looking, at the area here, which is phase 1. So the other parameter plan which came into the outline related to the general idea of movement and access, including a general development framework. So this gave a general idea of how the primary streets would work, linked to the link road that runs through the different parcels of land. We then also had a landscape framework to give an idea of what the landscaping would be, including the location of certain strategic play areas and this sort of thing. So these are the parameters which subsequent reserve matters applications, which give the detail, are considered against. So this is a phasing plan that was submitted as part of the conditions attached to the outline to show the phases of how the development is going to come forward. The first phase, which is under consideration this evening, is the light blue, which is 138 houses. The other 2 phases are split. As you can see, phase 2 is split across the Shottendane Road, with the last phase being between Shottendane and Manston. Just to clarify, the roundabout on the Shottendane Road is within phase 1, so that is within this phase, as well as the junction on Hartsdown Road. So the roundabout and that junction was approved as part of the access approved at outline, but the detail of the actual link road between those points was not approved at outline, so that's one of the things that's under consideration, which we'll be talking about. So just some images of the site. So this is a 3D image from Google looking from Hartsdown Road. So we've got the football club just sort of underneath us at this point here. So looking towards Shottendane Road. And then from the ground at this point here, you can see this is all the backdrop where the levels change. And so if we go down and actually look at what it's looking like on the site, you can see at this point there is a considerable level change as you go down the hill to then go up to Coffin House Corner. And then if we look from Shottendane Road in the other direction, so taking in this area here, you've got this bank of trees here which separates a site which separately has planning permission but is not included within this development. And you can see the edge of those trees here, so from the ground. And again, just with regards to these images, you can see there is a significant change in level across the site as the site drops down to the lowest point, which is sort of more centrally in the site. This is a view just turning right from that image, so looking back towards the Coffin House Corner junction on Shottendane Road, so in that direction. And then just to give you an idea of really the only residential properties that are seen in the context of this site, which are the ones slightly opposite on Shottendane Road, which you can see here are also on an elevated position as well, opposite the site. So these are 2 images that were provided by the applicant in the design access statement just to give a similar sort of view. So the top view is the view from Hartsdown but more on the site in a different time, and then a wider view from Shottendane Road on the bottom image there. So in terms of the actual proposed development itself, The proposal includes, as mentioned, the link road through the site from Shottendane to Hartsdown. It includes two junctions, primary junctions off to the northern parcel of the land, and includes an emergency access in proximity to Hartsdown Road at the northern end of the site. Then you have another parcel of land which is included within this phase 1, which includes an access onto the link road and then a parking access on Shottendane Road. So in terms of the structure of the development, you have a road behind the link road, which is for the properties that then front that road, that sort of face towards the link road. You have 3 blocks of flats within the development, which is located here, and then 2 in this location here. In terms of the mix of units that are proposed, there is a mix of 1 bed, 2 bed, 3 bed and 4 bed. In terms of the market units, it's considered there is an appropriate mix of the 2 bed, the 3 bed and the 4 bed to meet the percentages in the local housing needs assessment. It's already been mentioned, but secured through the outline was 15% affordable housing on this site. So that 15% required by the outline is provided. That constitutes 17 units of affordable rent and 4 dwellings of shared ownership. However, above that 15%, it's proposed to have 47 units above that obligated that are also to provide an overall amount of affordable housing, which is 49% across the whole site. And that's been possible because of the additional affordable housing above that 15% being able to access Homes England funding. So in terms of where these dwellings are on the site, this is the northern section of the site. The shared ownership units are the ones with dotted red around them. So not the actual colour of the dwellings, but the actual dotting around them. And the blue are the affordable rent. And so you can see from the image that they are throughout the scheme. It's not in one specific location. It's not so much pepper potted because it's half the dwellings, but it is spread throughout the development. Excuse me. And then looking to the south, you've got the flat blocks which constitute the affordable rent, which aligns with the requirements that we have in terms of the smaller units being necessary to hit what we've got on our housing register. And then again, shared ownership units, which are also included throughout the portion of land fronting Shottendane Road. The colours here relate to the actual size of the units. So you can see predominantly they are a mix of the yellow and the green across the site, and so they are the 3 and the 4 bed units. So in terms of heights of development, what's being proposed is to include predominantly 2-storey development, which are the light blue. The darker blue are the fully 3-storey, and you can see that relates to the flat blocks only. And then the 2.5-storey dwellings are the ones in pink or purple on that image. So what that equates to in terms of the parameter plan, this is something that's been provided by the applicant within the design and access statement, is showing just how with the shading on that layout, how they are according with the parameter plan, and it's considered that they do accord with those parameters to align with what the outline has stated, or the site could be developed in alignment with. In terms of the character of the development, so as part of the outline application, it was required that the applicant had to submit a design code. So that has been submitted as part of a condition and that has been approved. What that put forward was the idea that the character would be different in sort of 3 different ways across the site. That for frontage development to the spine road and the local distributor road, it would have a certain character. The secondary streets, which are down in the dark blue, would have a slightly different character, and then the outer areas or the rear areas would have a different character, which has been sort of designated sort of lane and private driveway, and that relates primarily to changes in the material palette as well as the type of dwellings and the width of the roads. So this image here shows it's actually the colouring here just shows the roof tiles and the difference between roof tiles. When we go through the street scenes, you'll be able to see the mix of materials, but there is a mix across the site depending on those character areas of different types of brickwork, tile hanging, render, as well as white boarding. So just looking at some of those elevations. So in terms of the first elevation we're going to look at the frontage to Hartsdown Road. So it's section AA, so at the top of this site plan here. So the top image is AA. So this was the image where you saw that actually how much the land changed as you go down towards the bottom of the hill on Hartsdown. So what you have here is the predominant brick development with property at the end here, which has obviously render on the top. So the aim here is that you've got a predominantly pitched roofs. The roofs do change as you move throughout the development, but also you've got a brick banding to sort of delineate between the ground floor and first floor to add a bit of interest, as well as changes in the colours of the materials. I appreciate it may not be obvious to members to see, but there are different brick types from the pair of semis here to the ones to the left and the ones to the right. And you can see here you've got frontage on from the corner property, which obviously fronts a different road. If we just go back to look at then the section which is DD, so within the development, so you can see the two Ds here. So this is a sort of inner street which faces sort of towards the countryside. You can see again that change in level on the site is present, and you can see a mix of detached and semi-detached properties with again the different material palette. In terms of the longer elevations, so if we just look at, first of all, we'll look at BB. So what we're going to look at is the elevation that fronts the spine road. It doesn't actually front the spine road, it fronts that internal road. But if we just look at that, so that's actually a combination of the bottom two layers, because it's too long to put on one slide. So you can see along this stretch, if we start from the middle image and go right to left, you can see from effectively the junction on Hartsdown, moving along, you can see where there's gaps where the relevant lanes and roads are. And you can see again that mix in terms of both heights, but in terms of also the design of the properties on the corner with the render at first floor. And then on the bottom row, you can see it's more heavily built up because we're on quite a main road frontage. And then we move to the actual flat block that's on the corner. We'll look at that separately as well. If I just go back and just tell you what the GG section is. So this is actually the section at the top of the site, the top of the image here, which actually fronts the countryside. So the long elevation here along the top is the private lane sort of character area. So you can see more detached units with weatherboarding and the changes in roof form that you have. So just looking at this flat block specifically, so this is the affordable rent units. So we have looked at this design, and there has been quite a bit of back and forth in terms of what this building looks like. You can see here that it's actually an angled building, so there are two elevations, so two flat elevations. There is also a significant change in level, which we'll look at, which means that the buildings that front the countryside at the top of the image are higher than the flat blocks. You can see there's parking behind as well as parking in front of these units. So the top image is the section that fronts the link road, effectively, or the road that's behind the spine road. So the flat part of the building is the right-hand side of that building. So you can see that it's been broken up by a change in material, bay windows as well as the balconies. And then you've got the image at the bottom, which again, the half of this property is obviously angled away, so you wouldn't see it in a flat form, but obviously you can see that this is the biggest building on the development. It's designated as the focal point of the development as part of the parameter plans, and the changes that have been made, we think, successfully mean that it breaks up the mass of that building, which is obviously necessary to provide the units for the site. So this was what was submitted originally. So you can see the image at the top there on the top left shows a bit more about some of the concerns that we had was that it wasn't broken up enough. It was quite uniform in terms of the actual elevation and window designs, and therefore we do consider that the amendments have successfully dealt with concerns. Also, this building has been reduced because there was an element at the rear which has now been removed, which would have caused an impact on neighbouring properties. So looking just at the I believe this is to look at the changes in levels. So the image at the bottom shows, again, a bit more about that change in level between the private lane on the left-hand side and the flat block. So you can see, again, that change in level which occurs as you go down towards where the link road is. And you can see within the development, if I, over in this area here, you can actually see, again, a more pronounced change in level between the units that you've got there because of that change in land levels. So moving over to the area to the south of the link road, which is on Shottendane Road, you've got two sections of this site because of a very, very significant change in levels. So you have a lower section which includes the 2 flat blocks and 4 properties, and then you have the upper level which just contains dwellings. So just looking at the frontage that fronts onto, so it's this frontage here, so the one that's sort of facing in this instance to the north west. This is the frontage here with the differently designed flat block. Moving through then, you've got the elevation which is effectively between the access, which shows that you have the access into the development and the 2 buildings either side, which are the 2 flat blocks. You then can see the change in level which occurs as you go to Shottendane Road there. So you can see that actually it's very significant in terms of change levels, and members that were on planning committee will recall a number of the issues that were caused viability issues related to the fact that there's very significant amounts of engineering operations that you have to do to develop this site. And then the last elevation that I'm just going to show you is the elevation that fronts Shottendane Road. So this is where there is a change in materials for the dwelling here, so there is a mix of the brick type in these buildings here, but these are the ones that front Shottendane Road, and this is where that photo which showed actually that the dwellings opposite are obviously set up and are of differing designs across there. There's no uniform pattern of design in this area. So just very quickly to go through the hard landscaping as we go through the site. You can see here that actually there is a mix of hard landscaping. So the grey within the site is for tarmac. You then have concrete block paving of different types serving either the driveways or private parking of the dwellings, or indeed the sort of private lane or aspects of things at the end, and also the lane that runs around the back. So if I just go down here, you can see again, try to minimise the tarmac on the site as much as possible, because obviously you've got the road that's running in itself. All of the areas of in orange, which are the sort of parking spaces, are all porous. They're part of the surface water drainage scheme to ensure that there's sufficient surface water drainage on the site as well. In terms of the soft landscaping aspect, this is the wider site, so this is all the 450 sort of dwellings. This is an image produced by the applicant which shows the indicative locations of the play areas on the site as shown on the outline application. So they are required to provide 2 equipped play areas being the areas that can be used for children of a number of different ages, and then there are 4 smaller local areas of play where you don't have quite so much equipment, and they for effectively the little ones around the scheme. So 2 of the laps are within this phase, and we have had the details of that, and we've looked at this in terms of the provision of both the equipment and the benches, and it has been considered that they do provide enough equipment and obviously have the benches and the seating areas as well as all of the bits that you would expect to have in the smaller play areas. As I say, the bigger equipped play areas are in subsequent phases. What is though included within phase 1 is that part of the landscape strategy included a trim trail which aimed to try and have a route through the landscaped area, which would include the ability to have gym equipment along that trail to try and encourage sort of for people that are jogging and wanted additional exercise. So that has also been provided as well, and it does accord with the parameter plan on that basis. So in terms of transport and parking, there are 191 allocated spaces, and so that's a mix of 1 and 2 spaces per dwelling, depending on their size. There are 27 unallocated spaces. I appreciate it's very difficult for you to see this, members, but there are unallocated spaces where there are banks of parking in front of dwellings. It's the case usually that there is at least one space for the 2-bed units that's provided, but there is an unallocated space sort of between them available. There are also, in addition to that, it's provided 47 visitor spaces. Now, those visitor spaces are independent of any on-street parking. So they are lay-by parking or areas where it's within the actual parking layout that it's provided. Now, this is obviously a matter that has been looked at by KCC Highways to consider, and there has been lots of back and forth about provision of visitor parking. It has been increased over and above what was originally put forward. We do consider it has adequate parking as it is. There are also going to be quite significant sort of controls on the link road, obviously in terms of restricting no ability to park on the actual spine road that goes through the two development sites, and we'll come on to the design of that in a bit. In terms of the accessibility of the site, so this is an image produced by the applicant which just shows the strategy with regards to how people can access the different parcels of land. So the main reason I'm showing this to members is to just indicate the blue line either side of the spine road is for a 3-metre wide cycle and footway. So it's both on both sides of the road. And that's come about from discussions, again, with KCC and looking at the comments of Active Travel England to ensure that the development and the infrastructure significantly promotes the use of cycling and walking as a means of travel around and from this site. So in terms of the layout of the development itself, a number of bits of work have been done to ensure that obviously it's usable for all types of vehicles, but just wanted to show this image. So it shows a 13-metre long refuse truck moving around the site to show that it's got tracking and the ability to turn around. It allows for a route to be completed in a round, effectively, to go round the site and then to then exit and then enter to go then into the area where they would then have to turn around. One of the key issues that's been looked at is to ensure that there are refuse collection points within 15 metres of where this tracking shows, because that's the aim when looking at our policy QDO2. For our refuse operators. In this instance, there's only one refuse collection point which is more than the 15 metres, which is around about 20. We don't consider it significant. It's been positioned to ensure that there's parking adjacent to a dwelling, but generally, this has been looked at in terms of to ensure that the refuse freighter can move around safely, and obviously this also accords in terms of fire safety, in terms of fire engines moving around the site as well. In terms of KCC Highways, as I've continued to mention, they've been heavily involved in the application. This is a plan showing the extent that the roads are to be adopted by KCC Highways. I appreciate this is a matter that members are very familiar with, and the concerns of when roads are not adopted. The road is to be constructed by the applicant through a developer agreement, but is obviously going to be fully in the control of KCC for reasons that I will go into. There are separate conditions with regards to highways works in detail, but you can see the extent again of the roads that are to be adopted as part of the scheme coming forward. So in terms of the link road itself, as I mentioned, KCC have been going back and forth on the design of this road. You have, so this is slightly tweaked image in terms of the orientation. On the right-hand side, you've got Hartsdown Road. So in terms of the two main accesses into the bulk of the housing on this phase, you have two right-hand turn lanes if you are travelling from Hartsdown to the roundabout. And then you also have two crossing points. One is a toucan crossing, which links from the development here along the footpath to this point here, which allows obviously traffic lighted crossing. Toucan crossing means you've got pedestrians and cycle that can cross because that's the width that's there. And then you've also got the pedestrian islands at another point later on down in the development. Just looking at it in a little bit more detail, so the roundabout is just the bottom of the image, just off the shot. To raise 2 points on this image, you have two Copenhagen-style crossings at the access points. So this is in accordance with Active Travel England's advice, and KCC have been looking at this, and it's obviously something that actually was incorporated on the Salmston Grange development as well. So these are effectively that the materials would continue from the footpath through the access, so that it would delineate on the ground in terms of hard surfacing, with the actual vehicle markings set behind that, so cars would be behind effectively a footpath which runs in front of that access. The idea behind it, as enshrined by not only just the changes to the highway code, but in terms of the guidance the government have brought out with regards to promoting cycling, is to actually give priority to pedestrians and cyclists. The key thing, therefore, is to ensure that these are safe, and therefore there is a condition that's been put on that ensures that there's visibility for cars when they are sat behind those points, so that to ensure that people aren't having to go on to that to then actually see either way. So there is one at this point here and at this point here, and there is another one at the other access onto the northern parcel here. One point that I just need to mention, which is about the emergency access, which is here. So there is a condition which you'll see at the end of the report, which is the last condition, which talks about getting details of the exact type, position and operation of the bollards to be erected there. Now, these bollards are required when the site is fully sort of occupied, to ensure that actually it can only be used in an emergency. The reason why that has to go in there is because the number of dwellings served off an individual access. So it is supported that it's provided, but we don't want, and certainly KCC Highways don't want this to be a permanent access that's just used by vehicles, because it's too close to the junction with Hartsdown Road. What has been looked at, though, is for a temporary period of time during construction, that some temporary bollards would be erected, which would allow access to this parking here whilst the development is constructed, for use of the three properties. They're slightly just out of shot on the left-hand side here, as effectively show homes and an office for the site. And it is considered that's proportionate. KCC Highways have been heavily involved in it, and that would be also managed through the construction management plan, which is conditioned as part of the outline. And this is just a plan just showing how turning works in that area. So in summary, we consider that the application has accorded with the parameters that are put forward for this area as part of the outline. There is a clear benefit in the sense of that it's providing additional affordable housing over and above. It's not a requirement of the 106 to do that, but it is obviously something that has been put forward and has been agreed and looked at by our housing team. Because the design changes that have been made successfully mean that the site won't appear, won't have what could be considered to be obtrusive buildings in the sense of their scale when it comes to flat buildings. You've also got the change in level across the site, which means that some parts of the site can accommodate taller buildings than they would normally be expected to. All of the highways matters have been dealt with. There are a few conditions which relate to KCC highways matters if members do want to discuss those, but overall the recommendation is for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Thank you. And who wants to speak? Councillor Alban first.
Thank you, Chair. As some of us as the previous council, and when we dealt with this on the outline application, fought tooth and nail and voted against the development of this site on the grounds that it wasn't enough affordable housing. That went to appeal, and we lost the appeal, so the outline consent was granted. I'm pleased to hear that the new owners of the site, who wish to develop it, that the affordable housing is going to increase on the site, and if I remember rightly, I think Mr. Livingston set up to about 49%. That's fantastic, to be quite honest. That's really good. The site in itself is well laid out. You could take some minor issues over the design of the houses and maybe the design of the flats, but all told, I think I think what is there before us this evening is acceptable. The only thing I will continue to say, because I still believe it to be true, is that the new road layout will not have the effect of making Hartsdown Road and Coffin House Corner any better than it is now. My own view is I think it'll make it worse. But on balance, I think that this is acceptable, and I'm happy to vote in favour of it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have several councillors lined up to speak. I've got Councillor Bayford next.
Thank you, Chair. Despite the challenges of the site, I feel that this is a very thoughtfully planned development in terms of building types among the 138 units and the beneficial alterations to the road layout and access. Outland permission has been granted, and I feel it would be hard to find a better application in terms of reserved matters. I'm delighted that the number of affordable units has been considerably increased, and I'm very pleased to support this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keane.
Thank you. I've just got a couple of questions. It's great to see the different play areas, but who maintains them afterwards? And second question, can you say a bit more about the open space around the flats and what's there? I'm always concerned as to whether they have a place where they can sit out, whether they can dry washing outside, that kind of thing. Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, so in terms of the specific play areas, that's a requirement of the Section 106 that effectively a management company is either set up or it's effectively managed by the developer. So in this instance, it's Places for People who would be the ones that would be managing that area. So it's not something that the council takes on. In terms of the flats, if I just go back to the first image, and then I believe I've got a couple of other images that I can look at in a bit more detail. Okay, I'll use this one. So the main flat block, which has the most units in, you've got an open space that's been created at the rear next to the parking area. So if you can see where the mouse pointer is on this northern section here, to try and create some open space. You've then got in the flat box that are down here, you've got limited space in this area here for these flats here. However, there is obviously a number of bits of green space that are around there in terms of both the trim channels, so the benches that you've got there, and this section of units here has obviously been able to get more space around it because of the way that the change in levels are at. So because of the fact that you've got quite a bit of landscaping on actually quite a small part of the phase of the overall development, we consider the sort of mix of a number of the flats obviously have their own private open space, but because of the quantum of the quantum of open space that's generally provided, on balance overall it is considered that there is enough to support to provide a good quality of accommodation.
Councillor Matterface.
Thank you, Chair. I've got three very quick questions. Mr Livingston used the term Link Road and Spine Road as interchangeable. Are you actually referring to the North Thanet Link Road or just the Link Road for the development? Because I was going to ask what happens if the North Thanet Link Road doesn't actually get permission and doesn't go ahead?
So this is independent of that. So yes, I apologize. I used some identify it as the Spine Road, some as the Link Road. I'm referring it to from the Hartsdown to roundabout in terms of this.
And that's I wanted that clarified. Second one, on one of your charts you had EV chargers, but no number. It said wall mounted and some were pole mounted. I assume the pole mounted ones would be for the flats and the wall mounted ones for the houses?
No, not necessarily, because where the if I just find that specific, yeah, it's. I think I've gone past it. Hang on, bear with me. Yeah, I've put it after the elevations. I went too far. There we go. So a number of the parking spaces in front of houses are actually going to be pole mounted because there's all the properties that have tandem parking to the side will have potentially them as wall mounted. So each property has a minimum of one EV charging point, which is to be provided by the developer. What we don't know is the exact details of those charging points, which is why there's the condition on there. So the condition is not about, it's about ensuring that they do provide them, but it's actually about getting the details of what type they're providing, and that's something that goes to environmental health to check.
So, because that just want. And the final question: where's the nearest public? The nearest bus would be Ramsgate Road or down to.
Well, in terms of, I mean, I'm going to say what I've said to you a number of times, which is that in terms of the sustainability of the site, that obviously is a matter primarily in terms of the impact on transport infrastructure for the outline application. In terms of anecdotally, I cannot tell you off the top of my head the nearest bus stop to it in terms of as the crow flies. But obviously that's why one of the key things in terms of the design and the layout of this is to ensure that other forms of transportation have been promoted, such as cycling.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you. I have Councillor Garner next.
Thank you, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, as Councillor Orban said at the moment, I mean, some of us do remember those quite vociferous battles over this around the affordable housing and a number of other concerns that we had that weren't actually part of the reasons for refusal, but they were still significant concerns that aren't for consideration tonight, I know, but they still sadden me around the primarily the loss of the agricultural land that's gone. But we had concerns about a couple of other things. The risk of flooding, which I still have a significant concern about, because this area, as some know a lot better than me, because they're much more familiar with that area, but and I think a number of people will have seen over the winter, that there is a lot of water runoff and there is a lot of flooding there. Now I was reading through the KCC flood and water management submission, and they had asked for the design to cater for worst case scenarios related to peak rainfall intensity. So I'm unclear how that is being done, whether it is being done in phase 1 or whether we need to wait for phase 2 and 3 before that's done, because unless that is catered for adequately, then however many affordable homes there might be, they'll be flooded. So it's really key and important that that's done. One of the other things I wanted to mention, which I raised when I called it in, was around the biodiversity, the impact on biodiversity. Now, when we heard this as an outline application, I don't think we had a bird survey, or there was a new bird survey came out soon after the outline application, I believe, which highlighted the presence of numerous red listed and amber listed species on the site, and there was some mitigation, and correct me if I'm wrong, so this is a question really, some land allocated for mitigation for these birds to know that they've got to move up the road, I think, up Shottendane Road. And that land, I believe, was TDC land further up Shottendane Road, which is now being consulted on for various things, including for a gypsy and traveller site. That's what I understood from what's been talked about before. So I'm concerned that obviously the birds know where to go, and then when they find out where they're going, they're not going to lose the land that's been mitigated for this as well. So that's one question I have related to the mitigation.
Councillor Garner,
yeah.
If they're two complete questions, can I just hand over to
good idea. Yeah.
to get the answers on those and then come back to you? Thank you.
There's one more after.
Thanks. So it's in terms of the mitigation, it's on-site mitigation in terms of the bird species specifically that was looked at in the public inquiry. So it's nothing to do with any other sites outside of the red line of the overall application. So it may take some time to go back, but I will just show it's phase 3 is where the actual area for specifically it was actually specifically to do with skylarks, but it did sort of encompass a number of the bird species, and that was on this. If I take it on this plan here, it's the area at the bottom of the image here, which was put next to the countryside in that location. It's worth noting that on the outline application, there's also various requirements for habitat improvements to come about through the reserve matters application, but also through condition submission. And the purpose of the application in terms of the reserve matters and what can be looked at is whether or not the layout still allows for that strategy and that mitigation to be provided. So I do actually have a separate image, which is more for context, because it's not actually part of the consideration this evening, which I will just skip to, which is this one, which is showing an indicative area. So this is part of the condition submission, not for consideration this evening, just to be absolutely clear, but it includes a number of certain bird boxes, log piles, different things as part of the enhancement strategy. There's also separately a plan that's being looked at by KCC Ecology, which is actually looking at the type of habitat that's proposed, and that's to come across the whole site in terms of the specific type of grassland that has to be provided, which obviously related specifically to mitigation that had to be provided as part of the outline. So those are the matters for the ecology. I do, before we come back to you, if I may just touch on the flooding issue, if that's okay. So this is another one of those matters that the strategy that was agreed at outline is dealt with through submission of condition details. So before any development can start on any individual phase, they need to demonstrate it to KCC as the local lead flood authority via ourselves that they've adequately dealt with surface water drainage. Now in this instance, you'll see from the comments that we've got from KCC, the first comment is saying we've got no concerns. However, because additional information has been provided through the process, because the overall drainage strategy is being worked up, that's why the question was asked about, has this modelled against the relevant risk that you've mentioned? So further figures were provided, and obviously the final comment is to sign off this scheme, which is basically showing where all the areas of porous paving are going to be across the site, including obviously where the drainage runs through the site. Indeed, to your point, drainage was a big issue and still remains a big issue, and that's why the aim of the development would be to better mitigate actually the existing surface runoff, even when you've got hard surfacing on there as well. But the considerations this evening about the layout are just to ensure that actually there's nothing in this layout that means that they couldn't do that drainage strategy that they've already got approval for, and again they've proven that it wouldn't conflict with that.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the road, the link road. I think we've correctly called it, not the. So the link road is dependent on, correct me if I'm wrong, all 3 phases being approved. Because I guess the link road goes through the next phase and then through the next phase. That's correct, isn't it?
I think actually this is, apologies, even though I spoke for as long as I didn't actually mention what is a little bit of a crucial point to do with the outline. So the outline has a condition on it which is a highways works phasing plan, as well as a detailed highways works plan condition. So this section of the road between the Hartsdown and Shottendane, as well as the roundabout, is being provided in this phase. And then what needs to be agreed between TDC and KCC Highways with the applicant before any work starts is how all of the different bits of infrastructure are phased, linked to the occupation of development throughout. So this development will provide the infrastructure on the site, effectively. It's not dependent on, as mentioned, the North Thanet link element of things. It's just that this development, to start to build and occupy these houses, it needs to provide the infrastructure that's shown.
So just to finish, I just wanted to ask about the next phases. What sort of timescales are you aware of that phase 2 and phase 3 will be brought forward?
An application has to come in for those 2 reserve matters within a set time frame after the outline was approved, and therefore, if I'm right in thinking of when that was granted, both applications, or it might be one application for both phases, would have to come in by February next year for consideration, obviously, by the council.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Rizeki.
Thank you, Chair. Just a simple question, really. You've got the archaeological exclusion zone there. Will the council be monitoring that and enforcing it to make sure it is strictly adhered to?
Yes, so you've got a few different conditions on the outline. One is the exclusion zone itself, which is shown as on phase 3, but there's also a programme of works that's already been looked at by KCC and has been cleared by TDC. In terms of what's found on site, that's got to be reported as part of the conditions. The conditions aren't totally discharged until we actually get the report of what was found, and the KCC archaeological officer, which is Simon Mason, is often in Thanet because of the significant amounts of archaeology that are around, and will be visiting the sites, including this one.
Councillor Alban.
Yes, one question actually I forgot to ask. Is the link road to be adopted by KCC? And if so, will they include potholes in it ready for when it gets there? Thank you.
I'll answer the first one. It's to be adopted.
And what about the pavements, the footpaths that are around the edge as well?
Also adopted.
Thank you. Councillor Wing.
Thank you. The bird mitigation areas, I mean, it's really important that the bird mitigation areas, will they be fenced in some way so that when they're eventually established, that they exclude humans and particularly dogs? I am a dog owner, but they are a disaster for birds, particularly when they're off lead. So what I'm saying is, if we create a bird mitigation area, but we allow access of humans with dogs, then they're pointless. Also, is there a net gain of trees? It looks really lovely and green and beautiful at this present moment in time, but often what we see here is not what we get eventually. Is there a net gain of trees and hedgerows, and is there a sustainable aftercare programme? You mentioned 3 types of surface: concrete, tarmac and paved areas, but you only actually mentioned that one type of material was porous, and that was the paved areas. I share the concerns of flooding. That bit by the cricket ground is always underwater whenever it rains. I really appreciate the Copenhagen junctions. They work really well in the rest of Europe. I think there'll have to be some driver education in this country, and I'm glad that cycling and walking is going to be supported. I do share concerns about where's the nearest bus stop. Have we thought about cycle sheds, particularly for the people living in flats? People who live in flats often don't have spaces for bicycles, so it's really important that maybe there's some communal cycle provision there. Also, the effect on the biodiversity during the construction phase, because I think we've all driven past a lot of the construction that goes on off the Hain Road, and the first thing they do is go and flatten everything. The whole site is cleared of soil. So will those areas that are going to be established as green areas, particularly the ones that mitigate, will they be protected during the construction phase? And it would be nice to know that early on in the development that the biodiversity areas are a main priority and they're planted up early and not left until the last minute. I do really appreciate the fact that we've increased the social housing. I think that's really positive. And I do also really appreciate that there's a mix of the type of social housing provided, and that it also appears to be exactly the same quality as the other housing there, which isn't affordable, and that it's dispersed throughout the sites. I obviously shared initial concerns and voted against the initial application, so we are quite sad that we're losing an area that a lot of us feel was important, including farmland. But I do feel maybe the new owners have taken some of that on board. Let's hope they deliver, and let's hope they can make further improvements to improve the biodiversity on the site. There were some questions. You want me to go back over them, Ian? Sorry. First one was a bird mitigation area.
Yeah, so in terms of, there is a requirement during construction for that area to be fenced in any event because it's also the archaeological exclusion area. So in terms of permanent fencing, that would be a matter for the third phase of development. So that is something that we can look at there. In terms of some of the other queries, in terms of cycle parking, so all the flats have an area within their actual layout itself, and I do have this as an additional, this is one of the flat blocks, but you can see on the bottom image, I appreciate it's a bit small, they've got bin storage and cycle storage. Now, one of the things that KCC raised was to ensure actually that there was enough cycle storage, so there is actually a condition which is asking for details of the type of racks that we're talking about, because obviously if you've got 2 racks and about how accessible it is, we just want to make sure that we're getting as much parking as we can within those areas. The individual houses themselves have also got to be provided with the parking cycle sheds that have been shown, so it's not just that, you know, it just has to be, it's just within the house, the actual shed has to be provided as part of it as well. In terms of the, I did just skip back to, where is it? This one. So just your point about permeable paving, it's more than just, I suppose, I've mentioned it on the other plan, the orange areas, where there is obviously, it's some of the orange areas and some of the other areas as well in the hard surfacing. But again, this is, you know, it's certainly understood to be one of the key issues. There are certain drainage features that are also included within other sort of sections of the site, so not just here, because they need a pumping station, because obviously of the change in levels that you've got there, as well as certain trenches, which is why some of those green areas in the middle of the site on the wider development can't be developed, because you need them for drainage. So in terms of the point to do with aftercare in terms of trees, there is a landscape management plan which has come in, so that's gone through sort of consultation with our arboricultural consultant, but the landscaping has sort of changed throughout the process, and we do have detailed landscaping plans. I haven't included them within the presentation because they're shown on the landscape master plan effectively, but the main trees on the actual either side of the link, spine, whatever you want to call it, road, are semi-mature trees. We've got, I did have them, I can't remember. 159 trees, and then various species. I won't show you what they all are, but there's a significant amount of information about the landscape planting. Now, in terms of actually having certain areas sort of when they're provided, obviously there is an element of ensuring that you don't put something in that's then going to be churned up by vehicles and affected in that way. Obviously, I suppose there's nothing in terms of additional conditions that we would expect to put on. However, the applicant is here and has heard what you've said. I think it's probably the, you know, so, were there...
No, I think that was it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I don't appear to have any other speakers, so in that case, we will now put the motion for the officer's recommendation for approval to the vote. All those in favour? And against? And abstain? Thank you. So that's carried, and we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 4B, 53 to 55 Albion Street Broadstairs. Now this is where it gets a bit complicated. I have Councillor Bayford and Councillor Moore who have declared... Sorry, Councillor Bayford and Councillor Rozecki. Sorry, that was my mistake. Yeah, but not, I'm going to do that. So I need you to leave, and Councillor Garner has already moved, which is what I was about to ask, because you're going to speak under section 20.1. So we'll just wait for the rest of the movement. Okay, so first I have public speaking, Speaking in favour, Mr Will Whitelock. Whitelock, please, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak. My name is Will Whitelock of Frampton's Town Planning, speaking on behalf of the applicant. So officers will explain, the original proposal included building works that were being applied for retrospectively. These proposals were removed from the application at the request of the applicant by reason of the impact of restricted opening hours on the operation of the business.
Can you hold on just a second? Sorry, it affects the microphones.
That's fine.
If you'd like to start again, we'll start the clock again.
Okay, thank you. So as officers will explain, the original proposal included building works that were being applied for retrospectively. These proposals were removed from the application at the request of the applicant by reason of the impact of the restricted opening hours on the operation of the business. The effect of the earlier closing time established in the current planning condition is a direct loss of custom. The viability of the business is affected as customers can attend other drinking establishments in Broadstairs and along Albion Street, which have extended opening hours. At weekends, the effect of the current closing time of 1 AM is that patrons use the Dolphin as a short stop-off before moving on to nearby pubs and bars. The trade is transient. The pub does not comprise a nighttime destination in its own right by reason of the restricted hours. The determination of planning applications requires a judgment to be made on the land use considerations in the overall public interest. It has to be accepted that all development brings about some degree of change. The degree of change balanced against the benefit of a proposal should not be unacceptable. So where does the overall public interest lie in this proposal? Public houses are important community facilities. They play a vital economic and social role, and their retention can assist in meeting the needs of the local community. There's a real risk that such facilities may be lost to more financially profitable uses, and such facilities are often difficult to replace. Since 2008, nearly a quarter of pubs in the UK have closed. It is small, independently run pubs, such as the Dolphin, that are disappearing. The National Planning Policy Framework attaches significant weight on the need to support economic growth and productivity. The proposal to extend the opening hours will secure the viability of the business. It is also essential that the pub is retained in order to maintain and enhance the role and character of the seaside town. No objections have been received from environmental health in relation to noise disturbance. A noise report has been prepared with mitigation measures to control the impacts of noise, avoiding congregation outside of the pub at closing time. The existing premises licence allows the opening to the proposed hours. Licensing officers therefore have no objections. So the sole issue here is a discrepancy between the hours established by the premises licence and a historic planning condition. So in my submission, the proposal is consistent with planning policy, and there are no adverse impacts of the extended opening hours that would outweigh the benefits. We respectfully request that committee members endorse the officer's positive recommendation and approve their planning application. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking under Rule 20.1, Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to relate one of the objections that I've received, and I think more of us have received, from a local resident. I am writing to express my strong objections to the proposed extension of opening hours for the Dolphin pub. As a local resident, I am deeply concerned about the increase in noise and antisocial behaviour that this extension will bring to our community. The current opening hours of the Dolphin pub already pose a significant disturbance to the neighbourhood. Extending these hours would only exacerbate the problems we are already facing. Late night noise from patrons, loud music and disruptive behaviour have become all too common, causing distress and discomfort to myself and other residents. The noise at weekends now already wakes up our 9-year-old daughter, which makes her tired and fragile during the week for school, which is incredibly unfair on family life. The operators already frequently flout permitted trading conditions, having their barriers out on the public pavement, causing people to have to walk in the road at night time. No consideration is given for local residents at kick-out time. There have been multiple complaints regarding the noise from this establishment from myself and others. The noise assessment for this application is quite frankly not worth the paper it's written on. Of course, when you know you are being tested by someone you are paying to test you, you're not going to be playing your music at the level you would normally. The building has single pane glass which does nothing to alleviate sound. They regularly leave their porch doors open to allow music to blare out into the street. Furthermore, extending the opening hours can only lead to an escalation of antisocial behaviour, including public intoxication, vandalism and even potentially violence. This not only threatens the safety of residents but also undermines a sense of security in our community. It's crucial that the council consider the well-being and quality of life of the residents who live in close proximity to the Dolphin pub. The granting of late night opening is not appropriate for this venue and surrounding neighbourhood. I urge you to carefully consider the negative impact that extending the opening hours of the pub would have on our neighbourhood. I respectfully request that you reject this proposal in order to preserve the peace and safety of our community. Thank you for your attention on this matter.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. I think you now have to depart. Could you hit your off button as well? Thank you. So I'm now handing over to the Principal Planning Officer to outline the report. Thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. Just before starting the presentation, I would like to just inform members that 6 objections have been received from local residents on the grounds of antisocial behaviour and noise and disturbance, and they were not with us at the time the report was drafted. So just to look at the application, this is the application site outlined in red here. An aerial view of the Dolphin here in this location, Harbour Street running down there and Albion Street. Some photographs of the Dolphin. So this is the original part of the Dolphin. It now includes this section here. This is looking up from Harbour Street towards the Dolphin. And this is a view from the car park adjacent to the Dolphin. And as has been mentioned, the application as originally submitted did include a number of other elements that included physical works to the buildings. These have now been taken out of the application, and it is an application solely to vary the opening hours to 7 a.m. to 2:30 a.m. Sundays to Thursdays, and 7 a.m. to 3 a.m. Fridays and Saturdays. And this would bring the opening hours, from a planning point of view, in line with the opening hours which are on their premises licence. So this licence, the most recent premises licence, was granted in 2021, and there were no formal objections from the police, licensing office or environmental health. A noise impact assessment was carried out in support of the application, as has been mentioned, and it identified these properties outlined in green as being the most affected residential properties, and as you can see there's one right next to the Dolphin itself. The survey was partly an attended survey, and it was carried out on the night of the 1st of December 2023, and there was also an unattended survey where monitors were left in place to gather sort of background noise, and also the attended survey obviously looked at noise from patrons and music, etc. that was carried out. The noise assessment concluded that noise levels associated with the Dolphin operating for the additional hours that are now being applied for was actually low, especially given the noise level in the surrounding area, given that it's a town centre location. Environmental Health raised no objection to the noise impact assessment, its methodology or its conclusions on the application. They advised that it had 7 complaints since 2021 relating to noise, but no evidence substantiating these complaints was obtained. So officers feel that given the town centre location of the Dolphin, the level of background noise associated with such areas, and the fact that a view of the licensed premises the premises licence can be requested at any time by a member of a public if a licensee a licence objective, such as is not being upheld, that they feel the change of hours can be supported. So the recommendation is for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
And I saw a flurry of hands. I saw out Councillor Alban first. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I think the issue here really is not the actual opening hours. It's the noise that's being created within the public house, and whether or not anything is being done to enforce either the licence or any other legislation that covers the running of a public house. As a Ramsgate councillor, Eastcliff councillor, whose ward includes Harbour Parade, we're on a number of clubs and bars. There have been a number of issues there of a similar nature, and to be honest, it's taken a while for even ward councillors to be listened to in relation to what's happening in these public houses and bars. But finally something was done. So I think the change in half an hour from 2:30 to 3 o'clock isn't going to make a blind bit of difference. The problem is as well, probably within, I don't know what happens I've never been in the Dolphin to be quite honest, but as in a lot of other pubs, it depends whether they let their clientele get drunk. It depends whether there's drug taking within there. I'm not saying there is, but whether there is. And those are the issues, the social issues, which happen when they come out of the public house. So my knowledge of the Dolphin, has always been well managed, and the issues are stupid people coming out and causing a load of noise and trouble. But there has to be good enforcement of that, and I think what needs to be done, we need as a council to ensure that when bars are given a licence, that they are enforced and enforced properly. So as a planning application, it's a no-brainer that we should, in my humble opinion, that we should approve it, because it would be bonkers not to. But there are other issues to it which need to be dealt with. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Keane.
Thank you. I'm really confused about this, because if the actual structural changes were taken out, then I don't see why this is a planning issue rather than just a licensing issue.
It's a condition.
Thank you, Chair. So it relates to the permission which changed the use from a pub to a pub and a restaurant included an opening hours condition. So that was a request that was made at the time to what are the opening hours that you want to operate, and we put on the condition on the basis of those were the hours that were stated. So the change that were made here in terms of the use of the hour and a half element extra, obviously it aligns with the licence as was granted in 2021, but it's the condition which is the breach.
Councillor Bright.
I'm a little bit confused as well. I think I've received a number of emails regarding noise and disturbance from local residents, so that really concerns me about this particular application. I feel that this is more of a licensing issue, to be honest, and it feels like, I mean, it's hard. I'm getting complaints about noise, I'm getting complaints about antisocial behaviour. I would really struggle to support this because it's affecting people's lives, residents' lives. Public houses are important, pubs are important, but it seems to me that this is operating as a nightclub. And with old windows, it doesn't seem to have any soundproofing. Are we able to put conditions that if they have got a sound system there that they're going to be using until 3 o'clock in the morning, should we be putting a condition on there that it's got to be suitably soundproofed? And also, is there a dispersal plan for when people leave the establishment? I feel like it seems excessive to have opening hours until 3 o'clock in a residential area. And I know you say it's town centre, but it's not really a town centre, is it? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the additional hours that are being requested, obviously Environmental Health have given the comment on the basis of not just the impact assessment that's been provided, but also obviously the knowledge of the complaints over the years. And actually that's not just the current owner operating the Dolphin as well, but obviously previous use of that building in that location. And it's not considered that the installation is required. Now, that doesn't mean that if a noise complaint went to Environmental Health that they couldn't investigate it as a statutory nuisance under the Environmental Protection Act and could, discuss with the Dolphin about, well, what are you doing, how are you operating your music equipment, etc. In terms of, I suppose to your point about the location, obviously there is a mix of uses as demonstrated by the image, but also everyone that knows that area knows that there are residential properties, but it is also sort of, whilst it may not be on the high street, it is still within the town centre area as we would define it in the local plan. Do you want me to bring you in? No, sorry.
Oh, I can come.
Yeah, if it's okay.
Sorry, I was just going to mention that the noise impact assessment does have some sort of management recommendations that are conditioned in our in condition 2 of our recommendation, that those mitigation measures are taken forward and utilised, but it does potentially appear to be a bit of a management issue rather than necessarily a planning issue, potentially.
If I may just come back on one point, just to sort of pick up some of the licensing points. Obviously, as Annabelle's mentioned, there is the ability for someone to request a licensing review in terms of concerns about people frequenting the pub. The license has different measures about drinks measures and how much can be served to people, not serving people that are inebriated, and that's all part of that. But it is, a lot of that is, as identified, it is a management issue of the premises, and obviously there is certain works that can be, certain enforcement powers that the licensing authority can do, that can only be instituted if they are obviously reviewing and looking at the situation. Similarly with environmental health, the point about a complaint being made is that they will ask for residents that are being affected to potentially have a noise recorder installed for a period of time, where there's that, and there is also the call-out service as well. So there are different avenues to look at. In terms of the planning judgment, though, because of the history of the site and its location more broadly, that's why, and the lack of, I suppose, a concern from environmental health on the basis of, with the measures, that's why the recommendation from our perspective is to approve.
Councillor Matterface.
Thank you. I've got 3 points. Condition 3 in 2020 restricted hours from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., which of course is midday. I'm assuming it's 12 a.m., which is midnight. So that was what was approved then, but what we're being asked to approve now is 7 a.m. to 3 a.m. on the weekend, on Friday and Saturday. And it does say something about safeguarding residential properties, but looking at that, that means it's only 4 hours respite from potential noise for the people who live in that area. Another point is, I've noticed in the report there's nothing from Kent Police, who certainly on licensing would have a comment. So I'm just wondering whether the police as consultees were actually asked for their comments, because if they did, I'm interested to know why they haven't got any. And the third issue, the officer producing the report is asking for approval subject to conditions. I would like to know what those conditions would be, because it's I mean, there are some listed in here, but what specifically would the conditions be that is recommended for approval? Two questions.
I don't know if the police were consulted on this particular application, but they did raise no objections to the licence application in 2021. So we are aware of that.
The hours, the same hours.
Yeah.
The original hours.
No, these hours.
For these hours, yes. In terms of, sorry, I've forgotten what this.
The conditions.
The conditions refer to, obviously you've got the standard conditions, but the one, condition 2, refers to the noise, the mitigation that's contained into the noise impact assessment, which we, as I mentioned, sorry I've lost it now, talks about some management issues. It is about dealing with the way people are let out and dispersed and how they are managed when they leave the premises. It is also about containing music that is being played in the venue, inside the venue. So, for example, to stop music escaping, it's proposed that the doors to the pub would be kept shut after 11 p.m. and only allowing managed ingress and egress. So it's those sort of things that are to be achieved under condition 2. I think you had a third question which I've forgotten, sorry, apologies.
I was just saying it talks about safeguarding residential properties, but my point was only having 4 hours of potential respite doesn't really sound to me like it's safeguarding residential properties. So can I just check then, originally the hours were as in that 2020 condition, but the premises licence would allow longer. So what we're being asked to vote on is to go back basically to the premises licence as originally specified. Yeah.
Maybe I can help a little. The licence application predating it, they've been operating essentially since 2009 until 2:30 a.m. at weekends. So that's been going on for some significant time. The quirk did occur in terms of the opening hours when it added the extra building, so to speak, the next door building, and became the pub and a restaurant. And that's when the hours are restricted from a planning point of view on that. And now they want to go to the extra half hour to bring it to 3 at weekends and 2:30 the other days. So, and that would bring it in line with the current licence that was granted in 2021, if that helps.
Okay, Councillor Wing.
I'm still confused. Confused of Ramsgate. So one of the buildings had greater restrictions on their opening hours through planning, and the other building didn't. So because the two buildings then become one under the same ownership, they were guided by the restricted planning condition rather than licensing. Is that true?
Sort of. So because the application was to change, the planning application was to change the use of the, well, you can see it here. So it was actually to change the use, and actually the red line went around the whole sort of building, the two buildings. The restriction of the condition applied to the whole structure, including the restaurant and the pub. The pub obviously had previously been operating later hours before, but that's to the point that was raised earlier. We had obviously asked, what opening hours do you want? This is what we got back, therefore the condition was imposed accordingly with the environmental health agreement. So in terms of what this application is trying to do, is effectively correct the fact that at the moment the licence and the planning restrictions aren't the same. So this is to take what's in the planning, into what's in the licence. Now obviously, to Councillor Matterface's point, there are greater changes and earlier as well, which is obviously something that does need to be considered. Obviously, this is where clearly the late night is the time where it's considered to potentially result in disturbance, and I think that's the particular thing. And to the point that Annabelle was raising about the actual condition 2 and the measures within the noise impact assessment. So there is a premises noise management plan, and what that does mean is not only on those points that I raised about there's a licensing review potential, there's a environmental health potential, and potentially as well there is a breach of planning condition potential as well if these things aren't adhered to. And obviously we are aware that residents are very concerned about specific instances that they've had, and this is one of those situations where different elements of the council are involved and are aware of the concerns, and so we will be working with the environmental health team and the licensing team to ensure that all the different elements of the licence, the EPA and also this plan, are all accorded with. But actually for members it's just to consider whether or not the mitigation and the change in hours is actually acceptable in a planning sense, and obviously that has to look at the history and also has to look at the location as well, because there are other establishments around there and there is obviously background noise.
I want to go on. So what was the original reason for putting that planning condition in place? I've got more questions, sorry, but I'll do them one at a time. There must have been a reason for putting that planning condition in place.
You're absolutely right. So the ground of the condition is effectively the standard ground of any opening hours condition, because the only reason we would want to restrict opening hours, different from anything in any other form of licence, whatever it is to do with the impact on residential amenity. But that was, in that instance, on the basis of they have proposed X, we've put the condition on the basis of what they have proposed. So in terms of if they wanted to change that, it's still effectively something that just needs consideration as whether or not that would be harmful or not. It's not to say that that's the maximum that they can go to, it's that that's what they proposed in this instance. So it's not that environmental health said you have to put it on for this. It wouldn't come from environmental health. It's effectively that the opening hours were put forward by the applicant in that instance. Reasons behind that, unknown, but that's where we are.
Those initial planning condition, was it put on the grey building or the white building? Sorry, I've got to go on.
It's on both, because the red line for the application went round the whole thing, and obviously any condition applies unless it's very specifically worded to what's in the site, and the red line went round both the Dolphin and the restaurant part of the Dolphin next door.
Was that once they became one building? So which building prior to them becoming one building was the planning condition on? It's really important for me to understand this.
The planning condition wasn't on the building before 2020. Licensing had different opening hours on the building, but there was no planning condition before 2020 with regards to opening hours, as far as I'm aware, because it's been a pub for decades, you know.
I have a real issue with this town centre location, because our town centres are changing, particularly in Ramsgate. They're becoming more residential. So I think our original vision of a town centre was there's nobody living in there because all the shops are shut, and that's simply not true anymore. I don't get this, and I'm with Councillor Matterface. I live on a street where there's 3 properties that run as alcoholic. They have licences, and I am disturbed at throwing out time. Fortunately for me, it's not 3 a.m. in the morning, and I don't. So I'm coming from an impact on neighbours, and you can put all the mitigations you like on that building, but at 3 o'clock when people leave that building, they are going to be loud and they are going to disturb a town centre location where there may be no other noise, or there may be other noise in different locations. And our town centres are becoming increasingly residential. So I don't think we can keep saying this is a town centre location and anything goes, because I don't think anything should go in our town centre locations anymore. So I am very concerned about this whole thing, actually.
Councillor Moore?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Being one of the very few Bradstonians in the room, having been born and bred in Broadstairs and having grown up in this area, I've listened to all the councillors' concerns. I've listened to Councillor Alban, Councillor Wing regarding the issues they've had in Ramsgate with similar drinking establishments. My concern is that I think it's difficult to refuse this because of what's gone on already. But what we do have in our arsenal is all the litigation that we can bring down to bear on the applicant and the managers of that establishment should they fail and cause problems. So, as Mr Livingston's mentioned, we can have a sound assessment, we can have monitors put there, the residents can do that. The residents can be made aware that any antisocial behaviour is recorded and reported, and if there's a historical build-up of that, then this could then be redressed and looked at their licensing to be revoked at a later date. So I can't see us refusing it. As much as I understand, in that sort of proximity, there's about 10 pubs in that area, or 10 drinking establishments already. It's a focal point for socialising in Broadstairs, always has been. So I find it hard for us to refuse it on those grounds, but we do have the ammunition to take them to task should there be breaches, and that's the point we need to make to the applicant, and we need to enforce to licensing as well. And so I find it very hard to say no on this application. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Matterface.
I just want to come back when I raised about conditions, because what the report we've got here has conditions relating to the bit that we're not actually discussing. So is there any reason why the report as produced didn't just come for the licensing hours? Because it's talking about the extension and that's been removed, but it's not been removed from this report. So when asked about conditions, because there's condition 1, the development hereby permitted shall be begun before the expiration of 3 years, but that's not applicable to this, is it?
No, well, sorry, if I may, Chair. The reason why all those conditions are on there, and in fact, arguably that condition shouldn't be on there, so we can clarify that, but the other conditions are on there because this is actually varying the 2020 permission. But we are only, as the council, required to look at the one issue that they've asked to vary, which is why all the other conditions are repeated from the 2020 approval, but it's just the change is only on the opening hours.
So it's basically number 3 is the only condition that we're actually...
Well, in this instance, obviously, there is the condition with regards to the noise impact assessment, which is obviously is relevant to be able to be considered.
Thank you. One of the things that I'd like to say as an Eastcliff councillor, along with Councillor Orban and Councillor Wingers have mentioned this, is that we have seen in Eastcliff a lot of problems increasing. We've had a domino effect of applications to open until 4:30 in the morning, and Ramsgate has the highest problem at night for antisocial behaviour, and it does seem to be very much a part of the ongoing ever increasing hours in opening. And usually the increase until 4:30 in the morning is for restaurant reasons. So my concern on this, and I speak as a member of the committee, my concern is about what's happening in the surrounding areas. I don't want the Dolphin to be disadvantaged by not being allowed to open, but also a phrase that we have been using a lot in the 2 Ramsgate wards is about the community, I can't even say it. Thank you. Impact. Now, under the Licensing Act 2003, there is a, Councillor Wing, can you say it for me again? Impact assessment provision. I understand that our licensing team haven't actually got a cumulative impact assessment, but they are considering this at the moment because I have been making my own inquiries. But what I'm not getting from all of the information that we've discussed and from the report is what the cumulative, you know what I'm saying, impact is. And that is something that is of great concern to me, having seen what has happened in Ramsgate. I understand and have no problem with the 7 o'clock opening. I understand that's about breakfast times. But I am concerned about Broadstairs becoming another Ramsgate, to quote one of the councillors who's not here tonight, that did write to me on behalf of one of their residents. So, you know, will Broadstairs become another Ramsgate in its town centre, the same as Harbour Street has? That's my thoughts and my comments. I don't know if anyone else has anything else they want to say. Councillor Orban.
Chair, this is just bonkers, mate. let's get down to what we're talking about is half an hour. You know, what's going to change in everybody's life in that happens at 2:30 and don't happen at 3 o'clock.
So it's half an hour on one change on the some nights. On other nights it does change more, but in the particular nights of the later nights that currently open.
But
Just to confirm what
this is ridiculous. I mean, we're talking, this is a condition on a planning consent. You know, this isn't a new pub opening and it's going to open out for God knows how long and whatever, dancing in the streets. It's an extra half an hour or an hour. It's not going to make a blind bit of difference.
Okay, in that case, I think I have had all the speakers. In which case, we now put the motion for the officer's recommendation for approval to the vote. All those in favour? And those against? And abstentions?
So that's carried.
So that's carried. Thank you. Yes, we're going to take a 5-minute break while we recover our missing councillors from the room next door. So if it is 20 to 9, so we'll just take a 5-minute break now. Thank you. Counting down. Councillor Bayford. Okay, we're just restarting again. Are we? Okay, so thank you very much. We're on to the next item, item 4H, land on the west side of Tothill Street, Ramsgate. Public speaking, I have Mr. Andrew Watson. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Chair and Councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this application. My name is Andrew Watson and I'm here in my capacity as David Wilson Homes Planning Advisor. Since acquiring the site, David Wilson Homes and the project team have worked diligently in conjunction with your officers and local stakeholders to develop the attractive and sympathetic proposals that are before you today. The site has been allocated for up to 250 much needed new homes in this highly sustainable location. Members will no doubt be aware that the site is allocated as such. This establishes the principle and parameters for development on the site. There are therefore a limited number of issues before the Planning Committee today to consider. As background, detailed planning permission was granted in June 2023 for 133 dwellings on the site. This comprised the first phase of development. A second reserve mass application for 81 units has also been submitted and is under review by the Council. This application before you tonight proposes 36 dwellings and would comprise the final phase of development to reach the allocated 250 dwellings. The required housing mix and 30% affordable housing target has been met in line with the Council's relevant policies over the whole site. The proposed scheme of 36 dwellings reflects the same principles as previous phases, with access from Tothill Street, and the site as a whole delivers an over-provision of open space and enhances biodiversity, providing an attractive place to live. Engagement with officers has been undertaken proactively and collaboratively via a planning performance agreement. A number of changes have been made to the scheme since it was submitted to respond to officers' feedback, including the proposed materials, additional visual variation to built form, more tree planting, and a reduced quantity of hard surfacing. Consultation has also been undertaken with Kent Highways and Kent Drainage, who are both happy with the proposals. In summary, the proposals will deliver several important benefits, namely the provision of much needed market and affordable housing on an allocated site, a policy compliant level of affordable housing, including the provision of first homes within this application, the enhancement and improvement of biodiversity, high quality landscaping and additional contributions to both primary and secondary education, highways, adult and youth services. Your officers have concluded that the proposals are acceptable in planning terms, and I therefore respectfully request that the application be approved in accordance with the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. I have, speaking under section 20.1, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. Thank you, officers. I was asked by Minster Parish Council and local residents, oh goodness, to call in this application. But I'm pleased to report that at this stage, the main things I have to convey are thanks. Thanks to TDC Planning for responding positively. Thank you to David Wilson Homes for collaborating constructively. Thank you to the people of Minster for their vigilance. And thank you to Minster Parish Council for detailed scrutiny of the plans and for not taking no for an answer. Well, not easily. Safety concerns about plans for the southern swale have been satisfied. They persist, however, about the northern swale, but we trust that TDC planning will ensure that suitable care will be taken with those arrangements to safeguard children using the nearby play area. Concerns about the height of the development adjacent to Greenhill Gardens in particular have been assuaged thanks to the placement of limitations by planning. And we trust that TDC will ensure that these restrictions will be complied with. We all welcome Southern Water's comments in relation to wastewater arrangements, and we will watch carefully to ensure that the development will proceed responsibly to protect the wastewater provision for our community. All that said, I want to raise one more point. The community, I think it's two, the community rejoiced when this development scale was reduced to 214, but was dismayed when this application brought it back to 250. Minster is a village with very good infrastructure to meet the needs of its current population, yet no scope to increase services to meet an unprecedented level of population growth. For that reason, Minster Parish Council is keen to protect its community from any unnecessary or irresponsible incursions, and who can blame them? Finally, I just want to point out that this land was farmland, irreplaceable, prime farmland. Again, thank you.
Thank you. I will now hand over to the Principal Planning Officer to outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. This is the application site here. So the blue line shows the area that is allocated in the local plan and formed part of the previous outline application. This application is a full application and is for the area shown outlined in red through the site, and includes the access also onto Tothill Street. So this is just an aerial view of the site. So Tothill Street is on the right-hand side here. And then this is the application site in the centre here, and running down this here, to the south here. And then you have the bridleway running along the west boundary of the site. So the application has previously had outline consent. It's an allocated site for 250 dwellings in the local plan under policy H010. These were the plans for the outline application, the parameter plans that were approved. So these showed that there are archaeological exclusion areas through the site, which are indicated in the dark pink on this plan here. And it showed the extension to the cemetery to the north in the green, and the area in the yellow was indicated as being development that could only achieve a maximum of 1.5 stories in order to protect neighbouring amenity. On the right-hand side, the other parameter plan linked to the open space and indicated that the built form would be towards the centre of the site with open space surrounding that area. This was the illustrative layout plan for the outline application, just showing how the number of units would have fit within the site. So the outline was for 214 units, so it did fall below the allocation for the 250, and this showed how it was intended to be laid out. Then following the approval of the outline application, a reserve matters for phase 1 was submitted, and that has now been approved. So this plan shows the layout of phase 1 to the north of the site. Phase 1 also included the open space provision around the edge of the site, including the works to the bridleway along the western boundary, and it also included works involving the swale to the eastern boundary of the site. So the swale fell within that application. This slide shows the reserve matters application for phase 2, which is currently with us and is a pending application. So there's no decision yet made for this, but just showing you the layout of that application. So that application is the area in red, and then the area in the greyed out area here, this is this application. So this plan here is showing the parameter plan, the illustrative layout plan from the original outline is on the left. And then the agents have provided us with a plan showing how the 3 phases, so all of this has not yet been approved, but the phase to the north has been approved. And then we currently have the application before you tonight, which is in the grey, and then the phase 2, which is currently pending here, but just showing you as an indication how all of those phases would fit together on the site, and how that is similar to the intended layout of the site through the iterative layout plan from the outline application. So just a few photos of the site. So this is from the north, from the 89 looking towards the application site, which is in this location here, with this being the bridleway, which runs along the western boundary. And then again from the north looking towards the site, and then this is just looking into the site. So these photos are a few months old. I think further works are probably taking place on site now following the approval of the reserve matters, but this is just showing how the site previously was. So it was originally agricultural land. This is just showing some works that have been taking place to do the archaeology on the site. So again, just looking around the western boundary into the site. And then this is from the south looking into the site. And then this is now from Greenhill Gardens. So Greenhill Gardens is to the east of the site. So this application involves dwellings that back onto these properties. And again, these properties on the left are the properties that back onto the application proposal in Greenhill Gardens. And again, just wrapping around, just showing you the starter properties in the adjacent road. And then this is Tothill Street, where the access is proposed. So again, the access was approved through the original outline application and the reserve matters application on the western side of Tothill Street. And then just looking back towards the application site here again with the access that's proposed from here. So this is the application before members tonight. The application is for 36 dwellings. So the phase 1 application approved 133. The phase 2 that's pending is for 81, which makes up the 214 that was approved under the outline consent. And now this is a full application for the additional 36 dwellings, which would make the total number up to the 250 dwellings, which the site is actually allocated for under the policy. So this is the access plan. Just again, this has previously been approved through the previous applications, but just showing you the access into the site, which would also need to be approved through this application, being that this is a full application. A transport assessment has come in with the application. Again, it's shown that the mitigation that we secured through the outline consent, which involved improvements to the Tothill Street roundabout to widen it and create an additional lane onto the roundabout. In addition, a financial contribution that goes to Spitfire Junction to improve capacity there. Those off-site works are considered to be adequate to address the increased vehicle numbers that would come from these additional units. So no further mitigation has been identified as being required through this full application beyond that we've already secured through the outline. So in terms of the actual layout, there's two pockets of development. So this is more towards the centre of the site. The property is just front onto the internal access roads. You can see there's a variety of different dwelling types, so detached terrace units and semi-detached within the development. It also includes flats and houses as well, a range of 1, 2 and 3 bed units. And you can see there's a staggering in terms of the layout. They all have front gardens. They all have 2 parking spaces allocated per unit, which would also include electric vehicle charging. These units here are some of the flatted units. So the flats are just within 2-storey units with a flat on each floor, each with their own garden space to the rear. And in terms of as you can see, this is the play area that was approved through phase 1. So these properties were front onto the play area, creating sort of natural surveillance of that space. And then this shows the dwelling unit designs of these properties. So they're similar again to what was approved through phase 1. So you could just see there's a variety of different features within the units: bay windows, gable projections, porches to the front, and there's also a range of bricks that are being used as well, 3 different brick types across the site and 2 different types of roof tile. This is a street elevation just showing the unit. So street scene A runs along the right hand side of this pocket of development. So this would front onto the play area. And then street scene B to the bottom here is along the south. So these are obviously you can see the terrace units here. And then this is the western side of that pocket again. So you can see the different unit types and the ground level changes as well across those units. But even with this increased number of units, you can see there's still quite a lot of space in between the units. So in terms of density, this development for this particular part of the proposal achieves 30 dwellings per hectare.
In terms of the site layout for the other pocket of development, which is along the eastern boundary, these back onto the existing units in Green Hill Gardens. This area here between the blue line and the red line is the swale, which there has been quite a few concerns raised, but as I mentioned earlier, the swale was part of the original reserve matters application, so has been already approved. But as I'll show you in a minute, there has been a section plan that came in with this application, which did show the depth of the swale, and that has raised concerns. So I'll move on to that in a moment. In terms of this actual layout, though, you can see in terms of pattern of development, it follows the pattern of development of the properties that are in Green Hill Gardens. Each of the properties again have the 2 parking spaces and a minimum depth garden of 9 metres. And then you can see in terms of these units, so these were the ones in that yellow area you saw on the parameter plans, which had a requirement that the unit shouldn't exceed 1.5 stories in height. So to the front of the properties, you can see the eaves level is at 1.5 stories, cutting through the centre line of the first floor window. But to the rear of the property, the eaves level is at single story level. Velux windows are contained within the rear roof slope. There were concerns originally with the sill height of these and whether these would result in overlooking of the properties to the rear. Amended plans have come in which have increased the sill height to 1.7 metres, and there's a condition that would be restricting it to that as well to prevent overlooking to the neighbours. So this is the street elevation of those properties. So you can see this is one long line, but I've just split into 2 on this slide. But again, there'll be a range of brick types, and there's also some tile hanging across some of these units as well. And then the building bottom right is the one closest to the emergency access. And so you can see that slightly smaller unit. So this was the plan that came in just to try and show the separation distance between the properties and the existing neighbouring residents, which had the details of the swale included. So you can see in terms of the distance between the properties, there's a 30-metre distance between the proposed dwellings and the existing residents in Green Hill Gardens. So that, alongside the increased sill height of the rear windows, means that there's no concern regarding overlooking of those properties, and privacy will be secured for those properties. In terms of the swale, even though it wasn't for consideration through this application, the applicant has looked to try and address the concerns raised by Minster Parish and neighbours, and have reduced the depth of the swale, which was originally shown as 2 to 2.5 metres, and it's now at 0.6. Which has reduced the concerns everybody had regarding the safety of the swale in this location. So this is just showing the updated plan showing that depth. And in terms of that, just to raise with you as well, that Minster Parish Council have this week also written into us to say that they have actually removed their objection to this application as a result of the works of these amended plans coming in. In terms of the materials, as you can see, these are showing the different brick types. So there's the yellow brick, and then there's 2 different types of red brick across the whole of this full application site. And then this shows the landscaping within the site. So grassed front gardens. There's also a few trees. It's a bit tight in terms of trying to have much space for tree planting within this particular application, but there's lots of tree planting around the rest of the site overall. But in some cases, I have managed to achieve some tree planting to the front of the gardens in this location here, and around some of these plots in the northern pocket. And in terms of affordable housing, 30% is proposed through this application, which does now include some first homes as well. They're shown in the location here with the pink units. So whilst they all are quite close to each other in this particular application, there would also be affordable units to the south in phase 2 and to the north in phase 1, so they will be spread out across the site overall. So other issues, drainage has always been an issue on this site. So the drainage strategy for this development complies with the drainage strategy that was approved with the outline application, which includes some surface water going to the combined sewer, and also some surface water from the roofs going towards the infiltration basin in the southwest corner of the site. Southern Water have commented on it, so there is still a need for the off-site improvement works to increase capacity for drainage. Southern Water have said they've got no concerns of development actually commencing on site, but there will have to be some arrangement with them in terms of how the units are occupied, because they can only be occupied once those off-site works have taken place, to increase capacity for the drainage and make sure there's enough capacity for these additional units to connect onto that drainage. And in terms of financial contributions, a draft legal agreement has been submitted, so that the agent has agreed to all financial contributions linked to these additional 36 units. In addition, the legal agreement will link to the legal agreement secured through the outline consent, which required the widening and resurfacing of the bridleway, and also the Spitfire Way contributions. So it would require that if this site alone was built and not the remainder of the site, that those things would still happen. So that is expected to be resolved. In terms of ecology, a biodiversity method statement has previously been approved. In KCC biodiversity have no additional concerns with it. No reptiles were found within this particular part of the site, so whilst there were some found on the other part of the site, and there is a reptile receptor site proposed within the land to be joined to the cemetery, within this particular area nothing was identified, but it would still come under the same strategy that was approved through the outline. So in terms of the application site, it falls within the allocation number for the 250 units. It achieves development that complies with the surrounding layout that we've already approved. There's not considered to be significant harm to neighbouring occupiers, and it achieves all the financial obligations as well as the 30% affordable housing in a sustainable site where there's also adequate open space secured as well, which exceeds the minimum requirements set within our policy for open space. So it is considered to be a development that is considered acceptable and in accordance with the policy, and therefore it's recommended to be delegated for approval subject to the securing of the legal agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Thank you. And do I have any speakers? Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I think that the variety of units, 1, 2, 3 bed, with front gardens and parking is admirable. I think that the units are very well spaced. Considerations have been made for the parish council's concerns. It's an allocated site. I really can't see any reason to refuse this. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Wing.
I seem to think that the 133 development raised some concerns over flooding, but it is good to know that the developer's been talking with Minster Parish Council and local people to try and address those issues, which they seem to have done. But I remain concerned about the potential for flooding on the site and maybe indirect flooding off-site. Can I just ask what is needed to be done to increase the capacity? Because we all know that there is a real issue with the treatment of sewage from Minster and the villages, and also the capacity to provide fresh water. So what is actually needed to increase the capacity of that water situation, and is it the responsibility of Southern Water to undertake those measures?
Yes, it is. We don't have the details of what that involves. Southern Water are going to carry out an assessment of what upgrade works were required. So I think when we originally dealt with the outline application, they hadn't carried out those works. I'm not sure how far along they are with them now. Obviously, I'm hoping they're quite, they've done some of that, because work is starting to commence on site now. But it is going to be up to Southern Water to carry out those works. And as I said earlier, they've said that none of the developments can be occupied until those works have taken place. So I think there's enough safeguard there to protect residents from any additional flooding or anything like that linked to the site. But yeah, it is their responsibility.
So obviously the developers are here, so that would be a big caution if I was the developer, that I'd want to be shoving Southern Water along as far as possible to increase that capacity. So that maybe that's a developer's got to be mindful, and considering the only thing Southern Water seem to be shoving is effluent in our seas, that might be quite problematic. So maybe that's a caution for the developer to try and shove them along. I am worried about the cumulative impact as well, because it's not just around this development here, but we've also got other developments in and around the Minster area, particularly at the Richborough site, that indeed have a the potential to further impact the potential flooding situation for Minster, which could obviously affect this development as well. So I wondered if there's been any overview of the potential direct and indirect flooding that the combination of developments that are happening. So we've got the BESS plant, the grid stability plant, the potential for Sea-Link to come online, and nobody seems to be taking an overall view about the potential flooding.
So in terms of, I think to the point that you're making about actually what's the overview in terms of all the different developments combined in terms of the cumulative impact of works. So that's fundamentally done through the local planning framework. So what occurs through that process is there is a strategic flood risk assessment which looks at basically all of the drainage basins and projected climate change flows that would look at into the future, and obviously consider all sort of housing allocations against that and looking at where new development is going to be. Obviously it's down to individual sites to manage their own impact directly and to ensure that they don't lead to the increase in flooding. In terms of picking up a number of the things that you've mentioned, that would come through a strategic flood risk assessment in the new local plan, or in the local plan review, as it's known, to kind of capture committed development. Also, it's something that KCC work on in terms of, again, as the local lead flood authority, so they themselves are doing policy work in terms of capturing that. And certain other elements or certain other projects will have to take account of where things are at the stage in which they put their submissions in. So to a development which is in close proximity to this, which is the Sea-Link project, obviously as part of their environmental impact assessment, they will have to look at all committed development, including the local plan, what that's looking at when they submit, for example, their information to the planning inspectorate. So the wider policy framework will look at it. Individual applications have to wash their own face, is the phrase that we use, but the strategic level is looked at on a longer term basis, and therefore it would be the new local plan that would have to look at the wider sort of hydrology of the area.
I did have some concerns because I think some of the properties are going to be connected to the water is going to be going into the combined sewer system, which is the main reason that we have this issue with effluent going into the sea. So I just wondered why that was Southern Water were actually going to allow that, given that that is the reason they keep telling us that effluent has to be put in the sea once a storm arrives.
Well, they're required to under the Water Industry Act. So they're required to have a connection to the drainage infrastructure, and through measures of tariffs on developers, but also on their commissioning plan over 5 years, they've got to plan for the infrastructure improvements to achieve the capacity to support the new housing. So they are obligated to allow a connection. How the improvements to satisfy all these houses comes about is a matter between the developer and Southern Water. Fundamentally, one way or another, it has to be provided before dwellings are connected to the network, and they have to demonstrate that.
Councillor Garner.
Yeah, no, I do want to labour the point a bit, actually, about Southern Water, because we've had other applications here before us in the last year off Tothill Street, and we've had the same reports from Southern Water, if I remember correctly, saying more or less the same thing. Southern Water is currently in process of designing and planning delivery of off-site sewage network reinforcements. So they were in the process of doing that 12 months ago or so, when we had one before us on Tothill Street, and they're still in the process of doing that now. And it doesn't give us, or it doesn't give me, or it gives me very little confidence that this isn't going to be burdensome on the Southern Water network, and we aren't. The best will be is in a similar situation, but it sounds like it's going to get worse. I really feel we need to know that they have completed their assessment and into what needs to be done, and they have started doing it, and they've given us confidence that they can do it before but I know they can't live in houses before it's been done, but you know, this just keeps getting pushed down the road all the time, and I just feel like it's rather like Southern Water backing up on us, and we're just waiting for a tsunami of issues with our sewage and our water delivery system. Yeah, and you know, something's got to be done by them about it.
Just to come back on it, obviously, this drainage and the need to connect and ensuring that there is sufficient foul water capacity is fundamentally has always been deemed by both the courts, national legislation, as a matter that can be conditioned. So to your point, but I absolutely understand the frustration that it's the same comment, but that work will have to happen before effectively the development can be occupied to ensure that actually the infrastructure is there. And we obviously put these conditions on for that purpose. You know, it is sort of known very much from Southern Water's perspective about what the local plan allocations are. They are involved in the local plan process, so it is not new information that there was going to be 250 houses here, and so it is about the local authority as well engaging with Southern Water to ensure that they are making provision, or at least an understanding that they're going to be required under the legislation to provide this provision in the future. But in terms of these individual planning decisions, it unfortunately does mean that, you know, we would not be in a position to refuse the application because effectively the condition is overcoming that reason, and they just have to satisfy the condition in terms of the applicant.
I would just like to say just one short thing. So I think it would certainly help me, and I suspect it would help others here and assuage our fears, if a representative from Southern Water were able to make themselves available to come along either to one of our meetings, or I know they came along over a year ago to an overview and scrutiny committee meeting to tell us about, you know, how this assessment, these various assessments are going, so that we can have a better understanding when we're sitting here with these planning applications in front of us, that we're more or less being told there isn't a good enough reason to refuse them, so that we have a better understanding that they are actually getting on with doing this, and we aren't going to be swamped in sewage, and all these houses are going to have a reliable supply of water when people move into them. I mean, you know better than me what the best forum for that would be.
It would be a members' briefing. It's so not a planning committee when the decisions are made on the planning decisions, but it's potentially members' briefing. So I think we can take that back as a general point, certainly.
Councillor Wing.
I mean, I don't think we can. I mean, the fact we've lost more farmland is tragic, but I don't think we can criticise the developer, and I will be voting in favour of this development because I think the developers have done more than enough to engage with the concerns of particularly of the residents of the parish council. But I am worried that we could end up with a development of 250 houses that nobody can move into. So the developers are there. My caution would be the developers. You need to make sure that Southern Water are doing all they can to put in place the increase of capacity so that people can actually move into these houses when they're built. So I will be voting in favour of the development, but I have concerns about Southern Water and flooding.
Okay, I don't have any other requests to speak, so we will now put the motion for the officer's recommendation for deferral to the vote. Those in favour? And thank you. And those against? And any abstentions? So that's carried. Thank you. So moving on to the next item, which is D09, the Britannia Fort Hill Margate. Firstly, we have for public speaking Mr. Julian Stone. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Ominous.
Actually, do you want to just pause a minute? There's a number of people I think are just leaving, so maybe we'll just give a moment just to we can take a couple of minutes pause. All right, thank you. We will just restart the clock and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name's Julian Stone. I'm a member of the Thanet branch of Campaign for Real Ale, CAMRA. We believe this change of use application for the Britannia Public House adversely affects the balance of the area by permanently removing a community pub that also forms part of the visitor attractions to the town. As way of background to this, in 2021, the Britannia didn't reopen when lockdown ended. Much later that same year, it was then run by another concern until closing in early 2022. We're concerned about whether the building's owner has been actively seeking a new tenant for these last 2 years, and we're unsure. There is an assertion, and this is in somewhere in the application itself, that the Britannia is now and forever will be unviable as a business. And this really has to be refuted, it being so close to the Turner Gallery and other Margate attractions. To be clear, the assertion that such larger public houses cannot survive in Thanet is not the case. For example, the Botany Bay, 2 Wetherspoons, one being the largest in the country, the Royal Albion Hotel in Broadstairs, the Minnis Bay in Birchington. We have at least 4 Carvery-style venues. All prove that larger public houses can certainly thrive. One of those public houses is in Minster, one of the large ones. It's the, what's it called, the Smuggler's Retreat. It's a large public Carvery style. That Thanet is experiencing a significant increase in population, and so to its customer base, must spell good news for all venues, including for the future of the Britannia. As we well know, new housing is already being built on many new sites in Thanet, but these builds can never include a beautiful, historic England listed public house. This proposed permanent loss of the Britannia removes a little part of the publicly accessible heritage of Thanet. Now, to those who think that a new micro pub or a trendy bar opening somewhere can replace this historic building, all I can say is that such would be poor replacement. As I mentioned, the pub didn't reopen post-lockdown in 2021, and much later in that year it was run by another concern until closing in 2022. That same year, may I go on? I don't have much left.
I'll give you half a minute.
That same year, but too late, important changes in the pub's regulations came into being, forcing fair rents and extra protections for tenants. Although perhaps relevant for the future, this has to be more good news for the Britannia's future. Skip something. Yes, there have been recent pub closures in Margate, but all these have reopened and in spectacular fashion. The Bull's Head, the Shakespeare, and the Northern Bell are all fine examples of reopened pubs that are doing well. I'm going to end by reiterating my first point. This application adversely affects the balance of the area by permanently removing a community pub that also forms part of the visitor attractions for the town. Thank you.
Thank you. I have 2 councillors speaking under Council Rule 20.1. First, Councillor Banbridge.
Thank you, Chair. I called this into committee as I felt the plan suggested overdevelopment in a conservation area of a Grade 2 listed building and the loss of a well-used community asset. I realise that the cottages have been removed from the Britannia's garden, but the bigger concern is the change of use from a commercial building for a public amenity to 6 small, expensive flats for the few. The NPPF states emphasis on sustainability and the need to plan positively for the provision of community facilities such as meeting places, public houses, etc. And CM02 of the local plan seeks to protect against loss of community facilities. The council requires that the applicant must demonstrate thorough research that there is insufficient viable demand for the Britannia and that there is A, alternative provision, and B, there has been every reasonable attempt to secure an alternative community use for the site. I see A list of pubs in and around the Margate Old Town, but none is an acceptable alternative provision to the Britannia, which uniquely stands alone at the crest of the hill near the Winter Gardens. And B, the applicant says the Britannia went into decline and no alternative use could be found, but there are no supporting documents to prove this, and I have evidence to the contrary. As a councillor, I have been approached by numerous parties who have put in offers for the Britannia to continue its use as a public house for the local community and have been deterred by what appears to be an inflated price tag designed to deter potential buyers for the building. These offers have included local buyers and a London pub chain that said the price asked was unrealistic. With his consent, I quote Margate businessman Max Porches, who stated, "We made an offer to the owner for the Britannian of around £500,000, which they rejected, as they said they had a higher offer. I'm not sure if the sale went through, but our intention was to retain the ground floor bar and have Airbnb units upstairs, much as it was. I'm surprised that the council are considering letting this application proceed, as we've all seen how well bars and restaurants are doing now in Margate today, contrary to the applicant's comments." End quote. The Britannia was an incredibly popular venue, serving breakfast and meals for the community and tourists with a fantastic outlook over Margate Sands from the highest point. It has music at lunchtimes, enjoyed by many, and was a regular place to go and meet for locals. It is an amazing venue that needs a chance to get up and running again. All the evidence suggests that the applicant decided to turn it into flats, close down the pub and inflated the asking price. We've been here before with venues like the Fort Road Hotel that stood empty and derelict for years, and now, due to good decision-making and forethought by TDC, is a thriving concern. The argument of housing shortage just doesn't work here. There are housing starts and planned developments everywhere, including a large number of new build flats recently built behind the Britannia itself. We also can't accept the argument that a pub is closing every day. We are a tourist destination, and pubs, restaurants and hotels opening and remaining open are to be encouraged. The historic, much-cherished Britannia is one of the best-placed venues in Margate, and we should be proud of it and protecting it from speculative manoeuvring. It's a venue that impresses tourists and brings together family and friends, and its welcoming atmosphere and large garden area. The last thing we need is more flats that are of no use to anyone but few that can afford them. Once it's gone forever. So I ask the committee to think very carefully before throwing away a much-loved community asset on the basis of such flimsy evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. And also speaking under Council Rule 20.1, Councillor Yates, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Committee. I'll try and be brief. I'm just expressing concern as a ward councillor and after representations from residents in the area at the loss of what's already been mentioned is a very historic listed pub in an incredibly prominent location. You can see the sunsets from Margate overlooking Margate Beach. When the pub had the outdoor parts open, it did get busy and they had live music there, and it's the perfect place for a pub, and you can see why they built it there. So my kind of concern comes that Winter Gardens reopens in a few years and there's no venue on the lead up to Margate Old Town to Winter Gardens when we have one now, which is the Britannia. It's the perfect pre and post Winter Gardens pub, and I've used it for that myself. So yeah, I'm here because I've had a number of representations from residents who are concerned by this, but also by people who wanted to take on the venue as a going concern. And I can't speak to the prices offered, but there definitely was interest in that venue as a pub. So from my side, on behalf of those residents, I would like to ask members of the committee to consider whether turning a historic Grade 2 listed pub directly opposite the Turner Contemporary, a perfect pub for a few drinks before and after going to Winter Gardens, in a town that's on the up, which is Margate, whether we really should be turning this from an asset providing local benefit into just providing 1 or 2 more flats, which will be very pricey, as I think has been mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now hand over to the Principal Planning Officer to outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the application site outlined, excuse me, in red. This is an aerial view of the Britannia, so the car park to the front here and the pub and its garden in this location. And this is another image, so you can see the Britannia there, then the adjoining police station, and adjoining residential development to this side. So just some photographs of the site. So this is an image of the car park, and you can see the Turner Contemporary across the road. This is looking obviously at the front of the Britannia. And this is the alleyway down to the side of the building. And this is looking back towards the sea from that alleyway. And this is the rear of the Britannia as it stands now. You can see there are some extensions to the rear that were in place. So this is the existing block plan. So you can see the pub here, its car park, and its garden area here. So the application is now for the change of use and conversion of the public house into 4 3-bedroom flats, erection of part single and 2-storey rear extensions, together with external alterations to fenestration and roof. And as has been mentioned, there was a proposal to build 2 dwellings in the garden area to the rear of the pub, but those 2 dwellings have now been removed from the proposal. In terms of the loss of the public house as a community facility, this is addressed in the principal section of the report. There is guidance in the national planning policy that seeks to retain community venues, and there is also policy CMO2, which is the relevant policy in our local plan. And that policy states that proposals which would result in the loss of a community facility will not be permitted, unless it can be demonstrated that. And the first thing is there is no alternative local provision which is accessible to the local community, and the proposal will not undermine. The proposal will undermine the ability of the community to meet its day-to-day needs, and then or every reasonable attempt has been made to secure an alternative community use, and the site is not viable for redevelopment to provide alternative community facilities, or alternative provision of at least equivalent or, where possible, an improved community benefit is provided in an accessible location to serve the existing community. You will note that in between each thing is the word or, so they do not need to satisfy all of those criteria. They need to at least demonstrate one of those, at least one of those. So in this instance, no alternative community provision is being offered, nor that as detailed evidence of marketing for alternative community facilities being provided, though there has been, as set out, some information given in terms of the decline of the public house and its profits and things, but it wasn't direct marketing evidence. But it has been demonstrated that there are a number of other community uses in the vicinity to serve the existing community, and some of those are listed within the principal section. So on that basis that they only have to meet one test on that policy, officers are satisfied that reluctantly this can be lost as a community facility because there are nearby facilities that would offer services to that existing community. So it meets the first sort of criteria of that policy, CMO2. So this is the proposed block plan of the site. So the Britannia obviously stays as a building here, and you will note there are gardens for each flats, either to the rear or front, and which would accommodate areas for bin and bike storage. And there would also be provision of 8 vehicle parking spaces in the existing parking area to the front. So these are in this location here and here. So this is the existing southern elevation of the building, and this is the existing eastern elevation, and this excuse me, the proposed south and east elevations together. You will note that you can see the extensions here. There will be built-in matching materials to match the existing property, and you will note there are some windows being opened up, and that to allow extra light into the building to provide a good standard of accommodation for future occupiers. So this is existing northern and western elevations of the building. And here we have the proposed northern and western elevations. So again, you can see there are new windows added around the building, alterations to a door here, and you can see the extensions that are proposed here. So if we look at the floor plans, this is the existing basement floor plan. As you can see, it was a storage, which is a common use for a basement associated with a pub. The proposed basement also retains an element of storage, but it has a snug and a living room, which actually relates to flat 1, which we'll see is mainly on the ground floor, which we'll look at next. So this is the existing ground floor of the building. So you can see you have toilets, etc., to the rear here, a kitchen area here, and then the bar and the seating areas to the front of the building. This is the ground floor as proposed. So flat 1, you would enter through here, and it would sit in this sort of half of the building with the living room and the snug to that building, to this flat on the basement level. This is flat 2 here, so again, another 3-bedroom flat. The existing first floor was essentially residential. It had a number of bedrooms, bathrooms, and a small office area. And this is a proposed first floor. So again, there's 2 flats in this location. Flat 3, sort of wrapping round here, and flat 4 to the rear mainly to the rear of the building, making use of the extensions that are proposed. So this is the existing roof plan and the proposed roof plan. In the garden, there are a number of trees that are protected by virtue of being in the conservation area. You can see that the red ones are category U trees, which are trees that aren't healthy and don't have a long life. But all the trees are actually going to be retained and won't be affected by the development, so they will be retained in any case. And so going back to the floor plan, as mentioned, they will all have individual gardens, either to the rear or front of the site. There will be parking spaces provided. There won't be any additional overlooking from the properties to cause harm to the residential amenities of adjoining occupiers, and all the flats proposed do meet the national described space standards, so they would provide a good standard of accommodation for future occupiers. So, to conclude, members, the application seeks planning permission, as I say, for the change use of the public house to 4 3-bedroom flats. The application would see the loss of the community facility, but it is considered that there are a number of other public houses and other community facilities in the local area that would provide facilities for the existing community, and they would be able to meet their day-to-day needs. There would be some harm to the listed building and wider conservation area through the erection of the extensions, but the benefits of getting the building back into an active use offsets this harm. And the development would also contribute, albeit a small contribution, to the housing supply within the district. There are no issues in terms of highway safety or parking. No adverse impact, as mentioned, on adjoining occupiers, and the flats are considered to provide a good standard of accommodation for future occupiers. There is a need for a UU for the SAM contribution, as with most residential development. That has not actually been secured as yet, so it is recommended that the application is deferred and delegated back to officers to secure the receipt of that undertaking for the SAM contribution, and so to be secured. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
And I saw first Councillor Bayford.
sorry, I'll start again. Though I always welcome extra accommodation to the area, this is not at all cost. And I don't feel that the loss of this significant community asset represents a healthy balance in the area, and therefore cannot support this change of use. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Alban?
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree with Councillor Bayford. The question, has the applicant provided proof of lack of interest in the building being maintained as a public house? What evidence have they put into to support their view?
They have put in some supporting information, but as I stated, they have not put marketing evidence in. But that is not necessarily a requirement of our policy, because it does give the free options with the or between them. They don't have to meet all of those criteria of that policy. So they are relying on the fact there are for community facilities in the nearby area.
I'll come back, Chair. This is a pub I've been in. I haven't been going to Dolphin, but I've been in this one. And the vibe in the place was always great. The music was great. Everything was good. Everything was good about it. And it's had its ups and downs over the years. But again, we've got a Grade 2 listed building. They want to stick a lump of an extension on it. And I really don't think that that's the right thing for this building. And I really don't think it's the right thing for it to be converted into flats. They're going to change internal stuff. They want to change external stuff. I just think it's wrong. I can't support this, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Rattigan?
I agree with my colleagues. I understand that sometimes we have to say goodbye to old venues to make way for sort of future development. But this is an iconic listed building dating back to actually 1840, linked to the old Cobb's Brewery. You know, it could be a fantastic location there. I think it would be a sad loss. And as other councillors saying, not me directly, but I know 2 or 3 businesses that approached them to purchase at very good market rates that were rejected.
Councillor Wing?
I mean, I've owned a Grade 2 listed building, and I did have to put an application in to paint to change the colour of my front door. So I can't really, exactly, I can't really understand why we've just going to allow the building to be butchered, basically, with additional windows and an extension on the back. I also live in a conservation zone, so I know the restrictions there, even if your building isn't Grade 2 listed. But you know, there isn't another pub in the area. I've not been in this pub, but it seems to me that since lockdown it's just been left to rot rather than invest. And you know, we can liken this to the largest Weatherspoons in the country now. The listed building in Ramsgate, which has been turned into a magnificent venue and enjoyed by a great many people with a fabulous view over the sea. And this has probably got a similar potential with the right investor. So I can't support this application either.
Anyone else? Okay, then I'm going to ask the pragmatic question. I agree with everyone that what's been said so far, but I'm going to be a realist and say, is there any way we can is there anything we can do to actually get the owner of this to turn it back into a pub?
Is that hypothetical, or do you want me to?
Well, you can.
Okay, no, I will. I'll try. So in terms of the control that TDC have as the local planning authority, obviously they need the planning permission to change the use away from the existing community facility, and the judgment obviously that we've put forward relates to the assessment of whether or not there's adequate local provision in the area of our alternative community facilities. If members don't feel, with full knowledge of what's in the report and the list in the principal section of where those facilities are, this is very close to the seafront, you just walk down the hill and you have other facilities, but if members do not feel that actually the loss of this has been sufficiently justified and that there isn't effectively alternative local provision which serves areas to the east, etc., a bit more, that it can be refused under CMO2. But that is something that, you know, is likely to be, you know, judged at appeal. And obviously, it may be overturned. We have had situations in the past where we've had appeals on loss of public house. There was quite a famous one, actually, of a non-designated heritage asset in Acol at the time. But obviously, certain uses were allowed to be sort of lost because of the policy framework allows for it if it's demonstrated that it's not viable. In this instance, the policy framework changed in 2020. It meant that applicants just had to demonstrate that there was alternative local provision around, and that came from the planning inspector on that actual examination, allowing the ORs that Annabelle's mentioned to be put into the policy, effectively. Now, that means that that's our policy framework, that's what's been adopted, so we do have to judge it against that. But if members don't feel there is alternative local provision, and that therefore this loss, you know, is not considered to be acceptable, then vote against the motion, I suppose.
Councillor Keane?
What about in terms of it being, you know, inappropriate in the conservation area? Is that not an objection?
Well, in terms of impact on the listed building, there is obviously a separate application which is for the physical alterations to the listed building. Obviously, that is one of the issues that's been looked at by the Conservation Officer, and there have obviously been back and forth discussions on it, about it. I mean, obviously the comment of the Conservation Officer is in there, and you know, she would be the first person to object if there was cause to object. What they have done internally with the layout is try and retain the key spaces which derive the significance of the listed building. So the areas that they're carving up are already carved up if you've been in that pub. So it's, you know, it very much is the actual use of the premises, whilst it obviously is important in the historic development or the actual history of the building, isn't enough to say that we would have to refuse it because it's always got to be a pub as a listed building. It's whether or not actually you know, that is a discussion in terms of the physical works in the listed building consent. In terms of the impact on the conservation area, well, visually, obviously things are, you know, slightly altering in terms of pub signs coming down. But fundamentally, the building is only being extended at the back, and I appreciate there have been some comments against that, but it's a relatively modest extension in comparison to the development that was originally proposed. You know, I think obviously if the motion falls, then obviously we can come back and discuss what the next steps would be. But obviously we've laid out the policy considerations in the report. That's not to say that members cannot refuse it, I think is the point here.
Okay, do I have any other comments or questions? In that case, we will now put the motion for the officer's recommendation for deferral to the vote. Those in favour? And those against? And any abstentions? That's lost. Thank you. Bear with us.
So in terms of next steps, so members have raised concerns, and I've outlined a little bit about policy CM02. In terms of the concerns that are raised about, for example, the extension at the rear, obviously, from the information that's been provided and the opinion of the Conservation Officer is obviously in the report about what the significance of the rear is in terms of the listed building and the size of the extension. Obviously, if members would look to refuse the application, then the loss of the community facility is clearly the factor that's been mentioned, and therefore, in terms of what that would be, I would suggest that maybe there would be a short adjournment to just discuss with any member that wants to put forward a motion to refuse the application to come up and have a discussion about the reasons behind that, if that's okay.
Okay, so just to announce that there is a short adjournment, and would anyone who likes to contribute to the new motion please come forward? Okay, guys, can we take our seats, please? Councillor Garner. All right, thank you, everyone. Now going to hand over to the Planning Applications Manager for the new motion.
Thank you, Chair. So following discussion and obviously listening to the debate and concerns about whether or not there is adequate local facilities that would offer what the Britannia is in terms of the community and work to the, and the facilities that are obviously down towards the town that's been worked up would be that the application should be refused on the grounds that the proposed development would result in the loss of a community facility without sufficient justification, and it's not considered that alternative local provision accessible to the local community is available to meet its day-to-day needs, and this is not outweighed by any public benefits, and therefore it's contrary to policy CMO2 of the Thanet local plan.
Thank you. All those in favour?
Excuse me.
Sorry, yeah, you're absolutely right. I need a proposer.
I propose that, Chair.
Councillor Alban, seconder. Councillor Bayford. And I should ask, does anyone else want to comment or discuss it? But no. And those in favour? And any against? And no abstentions. Thank you. That is carried. I am being waved at. Councillor Alban.
Yeah, just question, Chair. Obviously, there's a listed building application in relation to this. Do we have to deal with that?
We were just discussing that. So actually, I'll just let Mr Livingstone answer that one because that's literally what we were discussing while you were waving your arm at me.
So the important context of the listed building consent is that it's an independent decision from the decision that's just been reached in the sense of what it has to consider. So it's got to consider whether or not the physical works of the listed building harm the significance of the listed building, or whether or not the works preserve the character of the listed building. So it doesn't speak to the loss of the community facility, and it's an independent judgment on the basis of on the Listed Building and Conservation Act. So that's why it doesn't automatically follow that you refuse one. You have to refuse the other, or you approve one, you have to approve the other.
All right, thank you. In that case, that concludes the public speaking for this meeting, and I will call upon the clerk to read out the remaining planning applications. If a member wishes to reserve an application, will they please call out as the clerk reads? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the remaining applications are AO3, the Britannia, Fort Hill, Margate, AO4, Joss Gap Road, Broadstairs, AO5, East Pier Building, East Pier, Ramsgate, RO6, 35 Marine Terrace, Margate, and RO7, which is also 35 Marine Terrace, Margate. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have a proposer to move that the applications that have not been reserved be determined in accordance with the officer's recommendations? Councillor Alban and Councillor Moore. Thank you. That's the proposer and seconder. And all those in favour? And any against? Thank you. That's carried. And now I need to ask the clerk to reread them out just to remind us for the public purposes of those which have been approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the applications that have been determined are AO3, the Britannia, Fort Hill, Margate, AO4, Joss Gap Road, Broadstairs, AO5, East Pier Building, East Pier, Ramsgate, RO6, 35 Marine Terrace, Margate, and RO7, 35 Marine Terrace, Margate. Thank you.
And thank you. That concludes the business for this meeting. Thank you for your attendance and good night.